Hello and welcome to week 4. This week you are to read chapters 13 through 17, and this week we will continue the grant writing process. It's also the last week that we will be discussing the book. In grant proposals, there's often a section on qualifications. When preparing to write this section, you want to consider the following. First, you will highlight the organization's strengths by describing its history, mission, and experience related to the project. You will include the staff that will be needed for the project and their experience. If you are subcontracting for the services, explain this and explain who the subcontractors will be. You will also discuss the facilities and equipment that are needed. If your organization has outstanding facilities already that you can use, highlight that here. Also, discuss your partners that will be working with you and highlight the collaboration. Discuss stakeholders' belief and investment in the project. Lastly, discuss the internal systems that are in place to manage the funds, such as a finance office, and also explain how issues will be resolved. First, you want to include your organization's history and accomplishments. What are the origins of your organization? What experience do they have that lends itself to the current project? And what other financial support do they have? Who are your partners and what is their reputation? Then you want to describe the leadership. When talking about the leadership, consider whether or not they have a strategic plan for the organization, what role the leader will play in this project. You will also discuss the board of directors, their involvement and engagement. Some funders like to see that the entire board contributes financially to the organization. Next, you will discuss the personnel that will be working on the project. Some funders have specific requirements regarding personnel and want specific information. Here are some general do's and don'ts. In regards to the don'ts, it's important not to inflate salaries. Also, don't name drop people by saying, if we are funded, we'll ask so-and-so to work with us. This is looked down upon by the funders. You can also highlight the infrastructure of your organization that will support the work. For example, you should have sound policies and procedures that your organization follows. You should have accounting systems in place that can manage the funds, and you'll want to discuss how you have systems in place for evaluation. Share your communication system, how information is shared within the organization and in the community. And lastly, highlight prior successes of your organization as it relates to this project specifically. You will discuss the facilities and equipment needs for the project and highlight what your organization already has and what you're requesting money for. Showing that you already have some of the facilities and equipment can be a big plus to the funder. Finally, you will address other assets that you bring to the table. For example, you may have a great lab or library or access to advisory services or research resources. Highlight this. You will need to address any weaknesses that you have in terms of qualifications. One tough situation is if you have leadership positions for the project that have not yet been hired, but the funder is asking for resumes of project staff. This can often be the case since you may not hire someone until you receive notification that you received funding. There are a couple of ways you can handle this. One option would be to choose someone who currently is on staff who may work with the project in some way, then later hire a co-director or assistant, but at least you can provide background information on at least one key staff. Another option would be to name an interim director from someone among your current staff, knowing that you will hire a permanent director once the funding comes through. Or if you know who you will hire, once you receive notification, you can explain this in the proposal and provide this person's resume and background information. Funders like to see that you have people in place to run the project so that there is no downtime in trying to get the project going. Another issue may be that you want to hire a director who is early in their career without a lot of experience. Funders may see this as less competitive. There are a number of ways to handle this as well. First, you could apply specifically to funders who are interested in funding young investigators, or submit to a funder who is more focused on the quality of the project than on the resume of the director. Or you could hire an experienced leader as the director, then have a less senior person serve as a co-director. You could also have a more experienced person serve as an advisor or consultant. Ultimately, you'll want to choose the route that seems to make the most sense for your organization and to meet funders' priorities. Now that you have written the majority of the proposal, it is time to prepare the supplemental documents. The type of supplemental documents required varies between funders. This is in the instructions, so make sure you read them carefully. Usually you will need a title page, also referred to as a transmittal letter or cover sheet, and the funder will outline what should be on this. When deciding on a title for the project, you should make sure the title fits with the funder's values. It should describe the purpose of the project. It should be short and imaginative as well. It should not include the name of the funder, and it should not just be something as simple as a project to end homelessness. Be careful if you try to use a comical title, as this might not go well with the funder. Next, you may need an executive summary or abstract. This is a short snapshot of the proposal. It is often used to make the initial determination regarding consideration, so don't just skip over this step. It should include a description of the problem, if the organization has been funded by this funder before, an overview of the solution, time frame, the groups affected, the outcomes, the project's significance, the qualifications, and the amount requested. You should show how the outcomes are consistent with the funder's goals. There's often a word limit or page limit, so be sure to follow this. Next, you may need to show proof or documentation for a number of things. First, show compliance with government regulations, such as non-discrimination policies and research protocol. This is often provided through a document in which the leader of the organization attests that the organization complies with government regulations. Next, you may need to submit proof of non-tax status, which is a letter of determination from the IRS. Make sure it is current, not expired, and has the correct name of the organization. You may also need to provide a list of the board of directors, which includes their names, where they work and live, their area of expertise, and their relationship to the mission. They may also want to know what percentage of the board attends meetings and provides financial support. You may also need to submit the IRS Form 990 and other financial statements, such as a recent audit or operating budget. Your financial officer should be able to help you with this information. You may be asked for an organizational chart as well. Some funders will allow you to submit letters of support, whereas others do not want them included. Make sure to find out if they will be accepted. If they do, you may want to instruct your partner on what to include. You don't want them just to send in a form letter. If you're working with a collaborator, you may need to submit a memo of understanding, which outlines each partner's responsibilities. It may be helpful to have legal look over this contract for you as well. Lastly, if you're asking for expenditures over $500, some funders want estimates or bids from vendors. You may not need to submit these with the proposal, but you should have them available. The most important part about supplemental documents is to make sure you read the instructions and submit what they ask for, and don't submit extra information. Some funders will ask for a letter of inquiry before having an organization submit a complete proposal. So in this chapter, we'll talk about the letter of inquiry. For example, the Lumina Foundation offers grants to colleges and universities, but they don't have a proposal process. They invite you to submit a letter of inquiry, and from there, they decide if they're interested. Therefore, these can be very important documents. The role of the letter of inquiry is a quick snapshot of your project that leaves the reviewers wanting more. It should be short, clear, and compelling, with lots of white space and short paragraphs, and not long bodies of text. Included in the letter of inquiry are the components listed above. You'll need to explain who you are, what the need is, what your plan is, and how the funder can support it in a very compelling way, but should also be concise and brief, so this can be very challenging. The authors provide a number of tips when writing a letter of inquiry. Keep it brief and avoid big blocks of text. Also, just like the need section of proposal, don't use the words "we need." Use an active voice and use simple, easily understood words. Most importantly, connect the goals of the project to the goals of the funder and show enthusiasm and passion. And make sure to clearly identify the amount of your request. Some sample letters of inquiry are on pages 185 and 186. Before submitting your proposal, make sure you review it and have several others in the organization review it as well. You may want to give time for the team to provide feedback and incorporate the feedback, which is why you want to work ahead of schedule and complete the proposal way in advance of the due date. When you're reviewing your work, there are a number of things you should be looking at. It can be helpful to read the proposal out loud and look for spelling and grammar mistakes. These types of mistakes are a major turnoff to reviewers. Make sure the proposal meets the funder's requirements. Make sure there's enough detail, but it is also concise and abides by word limits. Using phrases directly from the funder's guidelines can be very helpful as well. Also, break up the text with charts, graphs, and photos. Page 189 provides a list of the 7 deadly sins of proposal writing that you should refer to. There may be a particular protocol at your organization for proposal review, but if not, you should still have several individuals involved in the internal review process, included the program director, the division director, the budget office, the development office, the internal review board, also referred to as IRB, which most organizations will have if there's research involved, and the president, CEO, and the board of directors. If you're working closely with another organization on the project, you may want to send it to them as well. When submitting the proposal, make sure you follow the funder's directions. Most proposals are now submitted electronically, and you should use this method if at all possible. If the funder does want hard copies, confirm how they want this, how many copies there should be, if it should be stapled, in folders, etc. Go over the guidelines one more time and make sure you have all the documents they have requested. Make sure to find out if you can submit letters of support. After submitting, some organizations may want to contact the funder, especially if someone on the board has a relationship with the funder. You want to ask in advance if this is okay, because it could backfire if they do not want to be communicated with in this way. Review the protocol for electronic submission and be sure you understand how to access the website or platform if necessary. Be sure to register early if there is a registration process for the online submission. My personal opinion is that you should try to submit at least 1 week prior to the deadline, just in case of failure of technology or other problems that may come up. The online submission process may have specific forms you need to complete with specific word limits, so make sure you use your word count wisely. Even if you're working on online forms, it can be helpful to type your information into a word processing program and then copy and paste, as the templates can be cumbersome. If you encounter problems, which is why you want to work ahead, utilize the customer service representatives that may be available. For federal grants, grants.gov, which is the electronic submission platform, has tech people that can help you with your problems. If you encounter problems and there's no customer service option, you may need to directly contact the funder. After you have submitted, you wait, which is the hard part. The review process is different for each funder. Some small foundations make decisions quickly with a small number of people. Larger foundations and governmental agencies have a longer process. Some of the common steps of the review process include screening the proposal to make sure the deadline was met, the organization is eligible, they have nonprofit tax status, and it fits within the geographic scope and that all instructions were followed. If it passes, it may receive a processing number and then move towards the next stage. Stage 2 is where the proposal is considered and evaluated by reviewers. The reviewers may be internal or external, but they are often given a rubric to assign points and then meet together to make decisions. During this process, there could be an on-site visit, which is rare though due to financial constraints. More common would be a telephone interview or an email. There may be a financial or legal review of the organization or an informal check-in. Next, the criteria by which the proposals are evaluated are applied. The rigor of this process also varies. Some examples of how criteria are applied can be found on pages 198 and 199. Usually, funders look at the appropriateness, significance, capacity, method, and clarity of the proposal. Next, step 4 is when a decision is made. Decisions could include being approved for less than requested, being provisionally approved, which means some part of the project still needs to be clarified before full approval, or disapproved, or deferred until a future round of grants. As a personal experience, I've also had the experience where the proposal was approved but unfunded. What this meant was that we received enough points to be awarded the grant, but the funding organization did not have enough funds to fund all the projects. After the decision is made, the organizations are notified. Sometimes the notification comes through the congressional members, especially for government grants. For government grants, the organization will then receive a notice of grant award or a GAN or NGA. How the notification is delivered for private funders can vary. They may call, email, or send a letter. It is also possible that you may not hear anything at all. After you receive notification, you may have to go through a series of negotiations with the funder, including fiscal negotiations over the budget or substantive negotiations over changes to the proposal or scope, and then legal negotiations where you may sign a contract or MOU. As the grantee, you can accept or reject these negotiations and funding offer. If you feel that you cannot accomplish the project with these new changes, you can reject the funding offer. If you are not approved, you can sometimes ask for feedback. For government grants, you can get the comments from the readers, which can be helpful when writing subsequent grants. The main reasons for disapproval include the project did not match the priorities, the need was not substantiated, the methods were unsound, the competence of the organization was in question, the budget was unclear or unrealistic, or it was poorly written.